Greetings, comrades, and welcome to my first review in 12 years? In any case, I have long wanted to do a review of Victoria 3, as I had the chance to review Victoria 2 when it first released well over a decade ago. Meaning that Victoria 2 is a game that is close to my heart. It is among my favorite Paradox titles, so obviously I couldn't have been more excited for Victoria 3 when I heard the sequel for my beloved game was finally coming. However, as I started to see more and more footage being released for the game, I did become concerned with some of the directions the game was taking. Although I remained cautiously optimistic, many people in the Paradox community did not, and they voiced their concerns loudly. Then, the game released, and it seemed to instantly divide people. At the time of recording, the game currently has a 66% mixed rating on Steam, and one look at the reviews will tell you that there is a strong divide between the quote-unquote old Paradox fans who liked Victoria 2 and wanted the game to stick to its roots, and the quote-unquote new Paradox fans who liked the new direction the game was going in. Well, as someone who has been playing Paradox games for a long time, I have enjoyed both the old and new style of games. I became intrigued by this divide. I've always been drawn to controversy, so I wanted to dive in and check out the game for myself, to truly see who had the right idea. After buying and playing the game for dozens and dozens of hours, learning the ins and outs of the game, learning the various nations, and bringing them from a backwater hovel to a glorious economic giant, I believe I am finally ready to render a verdict on the game and answer the age-old questions we ask ourselves about any game, which is it worth our hard-earned time and money? First though, I want to briefly explain how I see a Paradox game, because basically I see it in two phases: the pre-mastery phase and the post-mastery phase. Every Paradox title has a secret sauce to success, if you will, a way that once you learn, you can bring any country from rags to riches, from puny to powerful with said formula. For me, most of the fun in the game is usually the process of discovering that secret sauce and playing around with the parameters until I find strategies that work universally. However, for me, once I figure out that secret formula, most times the Paradox game quickly becomes stale and boring. Using the same strategy just for different countries loses its luster quickly. Only the greatest Paradox games maintain my attention into that post-mastery stage, where the game can still offer enough variety in terms of gameplay and experiences to reach into that 4-digit playtime. Hearts of Iron is like that, Victoria 2 was like that, so let us see if Victoria 3 can accomplish this grand feat as well. For this review, I've decided to go with a good, bad, and ugly structure. So, with that, let's start out with the good. And right off the bat, you can take one look at this game and see, yes, the map is good. Really good. I don't know if I would consider it better than the Crusader Kings 3 map, but god damn is it close. Plus, the Victoria 3 map has much more in terms of interaction. Obviously, when we look at the map, we can see the entire world rendered in all its glory. We can see the peaks of the Ural Mountains, the deserts of the Australian outback, and the lush forests of the Amazon, all rendered in stunning detail here. The best part, though, is how your interactions change the map, and the buildings you build in a region will start to be reflected on the map. If you build railroads, you'll see trains pop up. If you build sulfur and lead mines in the region, and then connect those mines to your rail transportation, you will then see trains coming out which have boxcars full of the resources you've built there. If you invest into tractors and equip your farms with them, you'll see them roll out of the factories and drive to the farms. Honestly, the most satisfying thing about Victoria 3 is starting with some rural backwater and transforming it into an industrial urban hub as you build more and more manufacturing and more people are attracted to the area. On that note, let's move to the second major positive of Victoria 3, which for me is how your technology and manufacturing complement each other. As you research new and more advanced technology throughout your campaign, you'll unlock new types of manufacturing options. These manufacturing options are usually, but not always, better. It depends on your circumstances. Sometimes they will require additional input resources which you may not have access to. Part of being successful in Victoria 3 is understanding which resources your country has and researching the technology which would best exploit those resources. For example, you might be a country with no coal, but a lot of cotton fields. You can research technologies to maximize your textile industries and combine that with a large port, and you can trade for all the coal you need and still have enough to satisfy your local demand. Min-maxing in this way is one of the most enjoyable and key aspects to success in Victoria 3. And once you find that sweet spot of production and technology, you'll see the line go up real fast. And there's no question that watching that line go up, whether it's your GDP, whether it's your standard of living, whether it's your literacy rates, all of it is extremely satisfying. The next big positive for Victoria 3 is the politics system. The political system has been touted as a real revolution for the franchise, and it did take me a little while to warm up to the political system of Victoria 3. However, after tinkering around with its laws and understanding which laws affected which parts of my country and the economy, the overall picture for politics and how they can have a massive impact on your country in Victoria 3 started to become clearer and clearer. And for someone who is a political nerd like me, the flexibility of Victoria's government system allowed me to create some horrific political abominations, some of which honestly worked out pretty well. For example, you could create a council republic, which is the type of government that they give for a sort of Soviet style of republics which emerged after the Russian Revolution. However, instead of morphing into a command economy from that point, you can instead adopt a laissez-faire capitalist economy, complete with open borders. If you wanted to, you could go full Warhammer 40k and create an autocratic theocracy with a command economy which produces nothing but ammunition and guns for glorious conquest in the Emperor's name. The most unfortunate thing here, though, is that there are a handful of quote-unquote meta-government types, which are superior to most others, generally speaking. When it comes to the quote-unquote meta-governments, usually it is full communist or full laissez-faire as the most powerful. However, you do not have to go down those routes to win the game. There are still other viable strategies. Unfortunately, they are not as dominant as these other two quote-unquote meta strategies. So if you're the kind of person who really likes to min-max for the most optimal playthroughs, there are a very few select choices, and you're going to be running those choices pretty much every single time. However, personally, I appreciate the flexibility and allowing my creativity to run wild to create some truly interesting government types, including types of governments which have never been tried in real life. A lot of the background footage you are seeing is through my Council Republic Greece playthrough, which had multiculturalism, open borders, and a complete and total democratic system. However, in this playthrough, I didn't end up going full command economy, opting to stay on interventionalism, which gave me the best of both worlds. And for whatever reason, the Communist Party just kept winning election after election, so they effectively became a one-party state. In any case, it's very interesting to see some of these governments play out and at least get some sort of simulation so we can see how they may have performed in real life. Obviously, it's a video game, nothing can ever be perfect, but it's interesting nonetheless. And the last really good thing I like about Victoria 3 is the pacing of the game. It's very brisk, and personally, I like that. It's definitely faster than a Victoria 2 campaign, and outside of a Hearts of Iron campaign, it's probably the fastest Paradox game to finish a campaign. And personally, I prefer these types of brisker paced campaigns over a long extended one that something like a EU4 or a Crusader Kings or a Stellaris has on tap. And that's because I'm just at a time in my life where it's hard for me to sit down and really dig into those longer campaigns. But I also realize that for those of you who prefer those longer campaign types, you might be left with less replay value. However, the shorter campaigns definitely make Victoria 3 a more appealing option when it comes to multiplayer. And with that, let's move into the bad. And on that note, I want to talk about the military system. And honestly, it's better than I thought it would be, but still not really that great or enjoyable. Much fuss has been made about the military system up to the game's launch, and well, yeah, we need to be real with ourselves. It's not like Victoria 2 had the greatest military system either, but at least I was having an actual impact on the battles. The system envisioned for Victoria 3 actually has a lot of potential, and I like the idea of no longer having to micromanage stacks of units across the map. However, when it comes to Victoria 3, the only input you have on your army is if it stops or if it goes forward. That's it. Naval conflicts suffer from a similar issue, however, they have slightly more options you can choose from. If I could just draw a front line and attack orders, just like you can in Hearts of Iron 4, that would work wonders in terms of improving the military system and make it feel much more engaging. Right now, generals will just randomly advance front lines, which can be frustrating as often they leave gaps which they won't fill with their own troops, making you have to undergo a tedious amount of micromanagement for a system that is trying its best not to have you interact with it at all. It's irritating, and especially given the fact that this system could have been so much better and so much more enjoyable. The second issue is that your lack of engagement with the military aspect of the game means that when it actually comes to the war itself, when the rubber meets the road, very little is decided on the battlefield. Everything is decided beforehand when it comes to the countries comparing technology and available resources. Well, I definitely feel like an argument could be made that is historically accurate for the era. It does little to alleviate the feeling of emptiness when it comes to combat. Because you have such little interaction, the winner of the war is always long decided before the actual fighting begins. There is little room for epic struggles against all odds, and for intelligent use of tactics and positioning to affect the outcome of a war, something which allows a game like Hearts of Iron 4 to continue to remain fresh and exciting even after thousands of hours. Unfortunately, much of the complaints you have heard about the UI system are correct. I've read some reviews on Steam that go as far to call it mobile-esque, and while I don't share that criticism because by and large I do feel the UI is aesthetically pleasing and I enjoy some of the small touches, such as the use of the Steam sound and animation when you pause and unpause the game. My complaint is in terms of how the information is delivered. Important information is hidden under various menus and layers, and sometimes where that actual information is and how you alter things are just laid out in some truly baffling ways. Let's take this example. You've just researched bolt-action rifles and you want to get them into the hands of your army as fast as possible, hoping to beat a rival to the punch. So you would think that in order to most quickly equip your army with bolt-action rifles, you would have to go to your military tab, right? Nope, wrong. While you can change your infantry equipment on the military tab, you have to do it general by general, which can be tedious. And if you want to raise a new army, it won't be equipped with bolt actions either. To equip everyone, you must go to your buildings tab and move to your arms building and select bolt action production. Then, if you want to change your entire military, you have to go to the military buildings option, and from there, choose which equipment you want your infantry to have. I wouldn't say that it makes no sense, but certainly not as much sense as equipping your military from the military tab. Here's another small example. You want to form that nice new formable nation you've been dreaming about. You've got all the territory, and now all you need to do is find the button to do so. It's in the government tab, you think. Nope. Diplomacy lens? Nope. Population? Nope. Oh, it's in cultures and hidden behind another tab. Too much of Victoria 3's learning curve is locked up in just trying to find and access the correct information that you need. Lastly, on the bad side, I need to put performance here. At first, performance was awful, constant crashes and lag. However, since the release of patch 1.1, I have had far less crashes, and the game does run smoother. However, performance is still not great. I get constant lag and frame spikes when zooming around the map, and as the game continues, the speed will noticeably start to diminish. And I've got a pretty beefy rig here, guys, so I imagine that a lot of people are going to struggle to run this game smoothly. So if your computer is old, this game is probably going to give you a lot of headaches. Alright, now let's get down into the nitty gritty. We're into the just plain ugly section now. And number one on that list is diplomacy. And there's no other way to say it. Diplomacy in Victoria 3 sucks. And it's probably the most inexcusable part of the package. As diplomacy in Victoria 2 was one of the best aspects of the game. Gone now are the spheres of influence mechanic, and it is replaced with the more vague regions of interest mechanic, which could be cool. However, all that this mechanic does is allow you to choose where you can actually exercise your limited diplomatic options. Any country outside your region of interest, you can practically do nothing with, while areas in your region of interest are limited to diplomatic options that are very basic, such as increase-decrease relations, trade pacts, war pacts, make them a puppet. The only notable and interesting diplomatic action in the game is asking to bring another country into or joining another country's customs union, which gives you access to that country's market and resources. And understanding this is one of the key aspects to being successful in Victoria 3. And because of these changes in diplomacy, things like reuniting Germany have become much less fun on the player side and much harder to do on the AI side, as I see Germany get formed in probably less than 50% of my games. In Victoria 2, the sphere of influence mechanic allowed a fun game of diplomatic influence to take place, which almost felt like a war before the war. The tension of trying to sphere that last country you need before Austria did was always a fun aspect to me, and knowing that if you couldn't do it, your only option left was war just added to that sense of tension. In Victoria 3, that tension is almost completely absent, and it makes a country like Prussia much less enjoyable to play. And this brings me to my biggest complaint about Victoria 3, the lack of historical flavor, leading to many countries feeling the same after a few playthroughs. As mentioned before, the AI seems to struggle to form Germany, which leaves a power vacuum on continental Europe that no country can ever fill. It just always ends up being a race to the top between France and Britain for who's going to be the greatest power. The Meiji Restoration is one of the few moments of historical flavor, but I have personally never seen the AI achieve it a single time. From the player's end, it can be tricky, so it's no wonder the AI can't do it. That takes me to the American Civil War, which is just a total mess. Sometimes the Confederacy forms and takes up all the states in America except Florida and Michigan for some reason. I've literally never seen once Abraham Lincoln appear as an in-game character for me. And then when it comes to World War I, it's nothing. There's nothing. In Victoria 2, World War I was always a disappointment for me, but at least there was this great war mechanic as multiple large powers started to line up on either side to give everything some diplomatic weight. Victoria 3 has nothing like that. The only thing it does right in this regard is that as the game progresses, alliances have a tendency to become more and more tangled, which results in some strange alliances forming and some interesting wars can happen. But there is nothing to really signify that earth-shattering, empire-crushing war, and it's an even greater shame because I think the system that Paradox has set up for both its military and economy could lend itself very well to a World War I type of scenario. As the game progresses, defense becomes stronger and stronger, so it becomes harder and harder to make gains in wars, coupled with the expense of maintaining massive armies, as at this point you have mass conscription, grinding away in attrition-type battles. Your economy is most likely going to break before your army. All of this leads itself to exactly how the real World War I was won by the Allies / the Entente, which was breaking the German economy before breaking the army. It's just such a missed opportunity for Victoria 3. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one last complaint I have in Victoria 3 in comparison to Victoria 2, which diminishes, in my opinion, the historical plausibility of the game. Back in the day, Victoria 2 had a map which had a finite amount of resources. For example, there was maybe only 4 million units of iron, or 3 million units of coal, or 1 million units of oil on the entire map. So in other words, once you were out of your iron mines, you were out, and you would need to find access to other resources. In Victoria 3, outside of certain gold fields and certain gold mines, all resources are infinite. While use is limited by the size of your iron mines your country has access to, usually these are generous enough to meet your needs, and most importantly, you will never ever run out of iron in them. This change in the system between the two games allows small nations to become economic superpowers because they will never run out of that particular resource. And if you min-max your technology to focus on that resource, you will get scenarios like Korea becoming wealthier than the entire American continent. It's great for some meme videos and whatnot, but ultimately, I think the game is weaker in the long run for this change from a finite resource system to an infinite one. So, where does this leave us? When all is said and done, is Victoria 3 really a game worth your hard-earned time and money? Well, to be honest, it's a complicated question. Personally, considering the fact that Paradox raised the price on this game from its usual price point of between 30 and 40 US dollars to 50 US dollars without a subsequent increase in quality, I cannot recommend this game at that price, especially knowing that there will be DLCs coming which will improve the game and will be released for who knows how much money. What I do want to make clear though is that I don't think Victoria 3 is a bad game at all. There was certainly fun to be had in my playthroughs, and I will be going back to play this game in the future. I won't be putting it down once I've finished the review, which does say something. There were flashes of brilliance when I was playing this game, but unfortunately it didn't come together into a product which is superior to its predecessor in my books. And I don't think that it will ever be superior to Victoria 2 without massive changes to diplomacy, warfare, and adding a ton of historical flavor. That being said, Victoria 2 was an amazing game in my opinion, and while Victoria 3 is just a good game. If you wait and get Victoria 3 on a good sale around the 20 to 30 US dollar mark, the game has a much better value proposition at that price in my eyes. Ultimately, Victoria 3 avoids becoming an Imperator level disaster, but it isn't a home run like Crusader Kings 3, and it's not anywhere near the grand slam as Hearts of Iron 4. Over time, if Paradox makes the right moves, they can definitely make this good game into a great game, but I don't ever see it becoming superior to its predecessor.